Good morning. The June 27, 2018 meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. In the interest of promoting the efficiencies of the order and the efficiencies of these hearings, person who is disruptive to the hearing will be asked to leave the hearing room immediately. Meetings of the Board of Estimates are open to the public for the duration of the meeting. The hearing room must be vacated at the conclusion of the meeting. Failure to comply may result in the charge of trespassing. Madam Deputy Controller, are there any corrections, additional deferrals on the agenda? Okay. Oh, well, Madam Controller. Are there any corrections, additional deferrals on the agenda?
Yes, good morning, Mr. President.
I looked before she was down there.
I'd like to note that we're moving page 97, item 1, to the non-routine. Page 98, item 4, to the non-routine. Please note these corrections. On page 97, item 1, under B50004898, in parentheses, it reads Department of Recreation and Parks. Please delete that and replace it with Baltimore City Health Department. Also, on page 97, item 1, a protest was received from Transdev Services Incorporated. Page 98, item 4, a supplemental protest was received from One Call Concepts Locating Services, Inc. And on page 98, item 4, a protest was received from Subsurface Utility, LLC. Please note the following abstentions. Mayor Pugh has no abstentions. Honorable President Young is abstaining on pages 91 and 92, and pages 102 through 106. The Comptroller is abstaining on page 2, page 3, page 42 to 43, item 3, page 108, items 3 and 4. Also, please note that the Director of Public Works, Rudy Chow, is abstaining on page 107, item 1. Those are all the corrections, Mr. President. She had already had it.
Thank you. I will direct the board members' attention to the memorandum from my office dated June 25th, 2018, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with any correction and addition that has been noted by the Deputy Controller. By the Controller. I will entertain a motion to approve all of the items contained on the routine agenda.
I so move, Mr. President.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carried. The routine agenda has been adopted. The first item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 97, item 1, Bureau of Procurement, recommendation for contract award B50004898, non-emergency medical transportation for Medicaid. Will the parties please come forward? Morning.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, Madam Comptroller, Council President, honorable members of the board. Aaron Sheriff Smith, City Purchasing Agent for the Bureau of Procurement, Department of Finance.
Good morning, Mr. President, Madam Mayor, Madam Comptroller, members of the board. My name is Cinchelle Barrow of the Law Office of Robert Fulton DeShield, here on behalf of the protestant Transdev Services. As an initial matter before the case moves forward, we'd like to move for a postponement of this matter. It's our understanding that the comptroller may have had an interest in a postponement, and if so, we wanted to move forward with that.
Okay. Is there a motion to postpone? Being there's none, we will continue.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. As Madam Mayor has pointed out, if we require our bidders to have the same level of experience as the incumbent vendor, we will never be able to get new bidders the opportunity to do business with the city, which result in giving the contract to the vendor for decades. When bidders no longer feel they have a fair chance at winning, they stop winning. They stop bidding. That allows the incumbent to increase prices and reduce quality of service with no fear of losing the contract. Both protests today are submitted by the incumbent vendor, who now feel entitled to the contract. They will both argue that the very fact that they have had the contract for so many years makes them the sole vendor capable of doing the job. In the subject protest, during the bidding process, the incumbent urged the city to award the contract to them without competitive bidding several times. They urged the city to agree that they are a sole source vendor. In fact, Transdev informed me that they were confident that the contract would not be competitively bid, and they expected me to follow their lead. I've never had a vendor say anything of that nature to me. It's completely offensive to the competitive bidding process. The sole source justification was based solely on the fact that they are the incumbent. In their protest, they referenced their tracking software for their calls. This ability is not unique to the incumbent. In fact, when the using agency reviewed the software offered by the recommended awardee, they actually found a lot of functionality that the incumbent does not provide. From the protest itself, it appears that Transdev feels that they should have received the award no matter how high their prices were. The protest states, "It is difficult to conceive that Transdev would be unsuccessful in a procurement such as this, where technical capability was intended to outweigh price." That belief could explain why Transdev's price was so much higher than Heart to Heart's and so much higher than their previous bid price, which was $30 million versus the current bid of $49 million, and to Heart to Heart's $33 million. Heart to Heart was determined to be responsive and responsible and received a technical score that was similar to the incumbent Transdev, 214 and 221 respectively. The deciding factor between the two was the lower pricing submitted by Heart to Heart, a Maryland-based company. In fact, it was the $16 million more that Transdev would be charging to the city during the initial term of the contract was the deciding factor in this case. Additionally, the evaluators were aware of the claims made against Heart to Heart in 2013, but as these claims have not resulted in a final determination of disqualification, they were only given that weight. The state of Maryland, who regulates these medical transportation services, was a participant in this evaluation process and was aware of these claims as well. The state regulators were present when the recommendation was finalized and were not opposed to the award to Heart to Heart. Additionally, similar claims of overcharging may be made against Transdev by the city. The city has made several requests for documentation to support the billing to the city on another contract, but has been unable to obtain the support, and in fact has been informed that Transdev intentionally billed rates not supported by the contract terms. The state and various Maryland jurisdictions currently have contracts with Heart to Heart, and they have not taken action to disqualify them to date. Heart to Heart is intending to open a new facility in the city, utilize MBEs and WBEs in excess of the goals, and hire city residents, including Transdev employees, in excess of the local hiring requirement. The expiring contract has been extended well beyond the initial term and has expanded in scope. The current term and value of the contract, if the extension is approved for the transition period, will exceed $99 million. While many of the activities cited by Transdev in the protest are to be commended, and the city is required to competitively bid this contract and cannot award a contract based on a relationship, no matter how long-standing. For these reasons, I recommend that the Board of Estimates reject the protest and award the contract as recommended. We hope that despite this recommendation, Transdev will negotiate transition activities in good faith to ensure that all residents of Baltimore get the medical services they need. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, as a preliminary matter, I'd like to introduce the individuals that have since walked up behind me. We have Mr. Ron Owens of L&D Holdings of America, Mr. Mark Joseph, the Chief Development Officer for Transdev, Mr. Dwight Kynes, the Regional Vice President for Transdev, Ms. Arlette Whitley, the General Manager for Transdev, and Mr. Navin Daz, who is also a General Manager. With respect to the position that we've taken in this matter, I would like to be clear first on what we are not seeking and then return to what we are. So initially, I would say it is not the position of Transdev that they are entitled to the contract as an incumbent. It is not the position of Transdev that the solicitation should not have been competitively bid. The position that we are taking is essentially threefold. Returning to the request for bids, we're highlighting that one of the parameters or the potential considerations or basis upon which the award should be made is the concept of which entity provides the best value. Best value is written into the RFP as a standard that is distinct and apart from the question of the technical score, as well as from the pricing component. And that's what we really want to highlight. TransDev being the incumbent does not create an entitlement per se. Again, that's not our position. However, we want to show what it does do. Number one, the continuation of services we believe adds value. The established relationships that TransDev has with its subcontractors, as well as other entrepreneurs, jobs created, individuals for whom those jobs have been created in Baltimore, adds value. We also take the position that best value can be established by the continuity of its software and its other aspects of operation that are already in place. That's not about entitlement, it's just about efficiency, and there's a value that we believe is added to that and could be calculated as a measure of best value. In addition to that, as we highlighted in our protest, we believe that there should be some consideration given to goodwill that's been established between the city and TransDev, because there were times when TransDev was willing to continue working, notwithstanding a need for transition when there were issues with the Department of Health. So we believe that that's something that the city should consider, the nature of the entity that it's doing business with and the willingness of that entity to go above and beyond even what has been called for in contracts. And it's our position that there have been good reports of the operation of TransDev, that there have not been complaints with respect to its performance. Turning to the proposed awardee, Heart to Heart, our position, again, starting with it is not, and then with what it is not that Heart to Heart is automatically or should be automatically disqualified on the basis of the pending investigation. However, we would take the position that it's worth significant weight to transition from an entity with a known record, known relationships, known contributions and dedication to the city to an entity that, on the other hand, does not have that experience, yes, and also has that specter of impropriety on account of the investigation. That's not our position saying that there has been a final conclusion. We admit readily that there has not been, but again, everything being weighted, we think that TransDev should come out ahead as the entity that offers the best value to the city.
Aaron?
Any response?
I mean,
I-
they're citing experience. This other company have the level of experience to continue, the services that citizens are accustomed to.
Mhm. And experience was a major factor in this. And while the city has had a contract with TransDev for a very long time, they did not achieve the highest technical score, of which experience was included. Their experience is great. However, it doesn't give them a high enough score to outweigh the $16 million additional pricing. And their score was very similar to Heart to Heart. So experience was definitely taken into account.
Any further?
Yes, just respectively, we'd underscore that if technical scoring and price were the only factors to be considered, then there would be no need for the provision providing for best value. That has to mean something different, additional, beyond just pricing and beyond just technical scoring. And so our position is that TransDev meets the overall best value for the city with respect to its continued service. And it is perhaps a subjective matter. I will not argue that in terms of how to weigh pricing versus how to weigh technical considerations and the best value. But it seems that there really isn't a response to the aspect regarding the goodwill, regarding all of the relationships and jobs that have already been included, and that goes beyond just a question of experience. We're saying more than that, and if I could have your indulgence for just one moment, I believe that the Chief Development Officer for TransDev would like to speak just briefly, personally, about some of those relationships and what they have done in the city in a way that may not be exactly expressed in the protest letter, if Mr. President will allow that briefly. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, Madam Controller, Mr. President. Mark Joseph with TransDev. We've been part of this community for over 100 years, and I want to just react to the comments about expecting this contract and being entitled to this contract. We compete all over the country, and we've been successful in competing all over the country and carrying ourselves in a very transparent manner. I'm sorry that we're here late, and I'm sorry that we don't have a lot of the answers to the questions that have been raised in terms of this bid. I can tell you that what I'm very proud of, and one of the reasons why I'm here, is because we have a track record of being part of this community. And in the case of this procurement, there's a 6% requirement for MBE and WBE participation. In the current contract, there's a 17% requirement. It's been reduced to 6% under this bid. Currently, we have 21% participation, and I'm here in part on behalf of our partners who are doing an excellent job, who are part of that 21%, exceeding the requirements of this current procurement. As far as the costs are concerned in this bid, the costs in this business are very transparent. We should look at what the labor costs are, we should look at what the insurance costs are, the maintenance costs, and all the other costs, and have a FOIA that can determine where these costs are and where these cost differences are. There's currently an investigation with regard to a Medicaid fraud. There's a company that is just finding a location in Baltimore City, doesn't have one, and has been operating in Harford County with a lot of promises on what they're going to do. My request, if possible, is to defer this, investigate this, look at both sides, look at our numbers, look at theirs, look at the MBE requirements, and see how we can protect the partners who provide the service, who live and work in this city, not with promises, but with actual performance. Thank you very much.
The recommended awardee, Heart to Heart, actually offered to exceed the goals of 6 and 3%. Both in, they offered to exceed the goals in the subcontracting and the local hiring goals on their own. So they offered to exceed 20% for MBEs, WBEs, and 70% for local hiring. And they open a facility locally because it makes sense to have your transportation activities in the location where you're working. So I would also like to point out that one of the reasons that TransDev was helping the city while there was no contract is because they were actively working against us replacing their contract. So while I appreciate that they continued service without the contract, I don't believe it was done solely to benefit the city, but to maintain what was at the time an $11 million a year contract.
Okay, well, I want to put on the record that you said you're going to do 70%. Baltimore City.
70%, yes, that is, and we put that in the board memo.
Okay, it's in the board memo.
Mhm.
Okay.
We also offered in the memo.
20%?
Mhm.
Okay.
20%, and we offered to, after the initial transition period, to make a report to the board, and that's also in my memo.
Okay. And we got to make sure. How much for MBE?
I'm sorry?
How much for MBE? You said 20%?
So their goal sheets meet the 6 and 3, but in their proposal they said 20% MBE, WBE, and small business.
Okay. And we're gonna hold them to that.
Mhm.
Okay. And there should be penalties in place if they don't reach those.
Correct.
Okay.
So we will be making a report.
I entertain the motion.
Mr. President, the motion is that we reject the protest as unfounded and approve the recommendation of procurement.
For Heart to
That's
Heart.
the motion. And award the contract.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The motion carries.
Thank you.
The
Thank you,
second
Mr.
item. Thank you. The second item on the non-routine agenda can be found on page 98, item 4, Bureau of Procurement, recommendation for contract award B500005360, underground utility locating services. Will the parties please come forward?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like me to reintroduce myself?
Yes?
Erin Sher-Smith, City Purchase Agent, Bureau of Procurement, Department of Finance. This is another case of the incumbent protesting. I believe in their protest they have stated that they've had this contract since 1992. My records don't go back that far, so I will believe them on that. We received several bids in this case, and both the recommended awardee and the low bid, and the incumbent all submitted protests in anticipation of the low-priced vendor winning the award. We actually agreed with the second low bidder that the lowest bid did not demonstrate experience. They actually didn't give us anything in their bid that was sufficient to determine. When we followed up, they gave some documentation, but we were unable to validate that documentation with DC Department of Transportation. They didn't recall using the vendor. They couldn't say the quality of work or really whether they got any assignments under the contract. Additionally, the most recent document we are given goes as back to 2009 and nothing more recent. On the other hand, the second low bid, while a new bidder, and I'm excited that we did get so many bids on this, they did demonstrate that while they don't have a client as large as the city, they have been doing this business for the required time period with very positive references for both government and private clients. And for these reasons, I recommend that you reject the award of the incumbent, one call, and award to Procom.
Good morning, Mr. President, Madam Mayor, Madam Controller, members of the board. Lorenzo Bellamy on behalf of One Call Concepts Locating Services, protesting the recommended award to Procom. You have a copy of our initial protest that was filed on May 29th. You also have our supplemental protest filed on June 26th. Before I proceed, I'd like to entertain, at least offer, three motions for you to consider. The first motion would be, and I know this is maybe unconventional, would be to award the bid to us based on our two submissions, our protests. The second motion would be to rebid this procurement based on our protest, based on it. Now we've received the subsurface utility protest as well. And then the third would be to defer this award, given the fact that we can obviously make the argument as to why you should award this to us, why it should be rebid. I have Matthew Youssef here, who's counsel for the company, who can talk more about this if you wish. But first, I'd like to at least entertain those three motions, and then we can proceed depending on your decision.
Mr. President, the motion is not well taken to the board.
There's no motion.
The board might treat the motion as a request. Perhaps start with the request for postponement. The protest itself is seeking the award to the protestant. So that's the matter before the board. With regard to the postponement, it's up to the board whether to continue the matter. But there is no motion from the board itself to continue it.
Well, we're going to move on.
Okay. Are you done? Okay. With that, Mr. President, I'd like to introduce Matthew Youssef to argue why we believe this award should be made to us, and then obviously the subsequent motions as well. So, Matthew.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Mayor, Madam Comptroller, President, and members of the board. Thank you for your time this morning, and I appreciate it. My name is Matthew Youssef.
State your name.
My name is Matthew Youssef. I'm an attorney for One Call Concept Locating Services Incorporated. They are the incumbent bidder, as was correctly, and we do believe that the record does reflect we do have more experience, but that is not the primary basis of our protest. Over the course of my client's operation of the contract, they developed a software and an operating system, billing system with the city that allowed them to synchronize the number of excavators that are billed to the city. That process, that software, the changing from the information of tickets, billing back to the city billing office so that they can bill excavators for those locates for that contracting services, is done at about 12 to 20,000, 15,000 times a month. And at the end of each month, those locating services are invoices are provided to the city billing department, which then allows the city to turn to bill those locates to the contractors that requested them. That process, that square hole to a round peg, square peg to a round hole, took about 2 years for my client to develop. We don't assert here that another company couldn't do that. We don't assert that we're unique for all of time in being able to do that. But what we do assert is that that billing process, that technical capacity, that part of our contract, is not in the solicitation. When we appeared for the bidding process and meeting of the bidders, we raised that issue. We raised that concern that this technical aspect of the contract wasn't included in the solicitation. We were told it would be reviewed during the course of the award. When we saw the other awardees presented, or the other offerors who presented bids, we realized that they didn't have the information necessary to develop the software on their own. They haven't communicated with Mr. Utility, and they haven't communicated with the billing department. If I may, I did bring copies of the report that my client had prepared from January to April, showing the amount of, board's indulgence for a moment, showing the amount of tickets that we used. In January, 12,598 excavator invoices were submitted to the city. The city billing department then in turn invoices those information to the excavators. That invoicing takes place between $15 and $35 depending on the specifics of that locate. If the new contractor cannot have that report to the city billing department, they're not going to be able to invoice those excavating tickets. And that is what One Call Concepts is bringing to the city and alerting us to this concern. Our bid is $46,000 more than Procom's over the course of 3 years. If we were to, with these submissions, invoice submissions, over the course of 6 months, those invoices total, assuming the lowest invoice price of $15 an invoice, $950,000 over 6 months, $2 million over a year. And over the course of 3 years, if that extrapolates out, it could potentially be a $6 million issue. And so when we look at our bidding discrepancy, we don't think that we've overbid or that we've presented a higher price. We've presented a price that relates to the work that we're doing. We don't think it's fair that the other offerors are being compared to our bid because they don't have the information about how that billing process works. That wasn't part of the solicitation. So what we're bringing before the board, and part of the heart of our protest, is either the board, in reviewing all the facts, recognizes that my client is the most experienced and capable of producing what the city needs and has done so for 20 years, or submit the matter to be solicited under a solicitation that includes this aspect so that the city can protect its billing process. Thank you for the board time.
I would like to respond shortly that this was taken into account, the ability to invoice, and it was determined that it was not to the level as argued by the incumbent, that it does not require software that takes 2 years to develop, but it is a much more simple matter of regular reporting. But I would like to let the recommended awardee speak to that as well as his attorney.
Good morning again, Mr. President, Madam Mayor, Madam Comptroller, members of the board. Sinchel Barrol of the Law Office of Robert Fulton DeShiel here with Procom Engineering and Locating, LLC, the proposed awardee in this matter. In response to the protestant, we'd assert, again, one, that the cost of billing is not as they aver, and also that the recommended awardee actually does have its own software and the ability to bill in conformity with the requirements of the solicitation, and also highlighting that to the extent that the protestant has claimed in its protest letter that additional costs may accrue to the city, its letter also includes a portion of the solicitation which expressly states that the software will be installed at no charge to the city. And so on that basis, we don't believe that that's a valid consideration or concern that the board should be preoccupied with or use as a basis to reject the proposed awardee. And just briefly, Mr. President, if you would allow, I will let Procom speak to the system that it has in place with respect to that technical aspect. Thank you, Mr. President.
Good morning. My name is Wayne Kacher, Procom Engineering Locating Services. Primary location, we're out of Joppa, Maryland. Right now, we do have software that is capable of exporting all the contractors, all calls, all information that the city needs to a specific sheet that can be sent to the city so they can do their invoicing. That is definitely not an issue. Definitely not an issue. We do have the software.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I would like to note that there is a 1-month overlap between these two contracts, which will allow time to ensure that all the information is flowing correctly.
Mr. President, if I may have someone comment on Ms. Shear's comment about the actual technicalities of the billing software and the billing situation. I don't think it's as simple as has been explained. Jason, introduce yourself.
I'm Jason Wedding, Operations Manager for One Call Concepts Locating Services. Morning, Madam Mayor, Madam Comptroller, Mr. President, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. These gentlemen were obviously employed to help make the case because this is not a venue that we are normally found and comfortable with. But explaining how we do things to those that have never touched it is a little difficult at times. And then we are tasked to try to bring that understanding to you in just a few minutes. The 2 years that it took to develop this was a cooperation between the Maryland Miss Utility Call Center, the vendor that supplies our software, our own internal programmers, and city personnel. Can this be duplicated? Certainly. And I have no doubt that Procom has people and can find people to do this. That's never been our argument. The situation that we're looking at, the potential loss of revenue based on this reporting and this specialized formatting so city personnel do not have to process anything. The data is sent, automatically sent through city systems, invoices are generated. That was the process that we worked through for 2 years to eliminate the personnel requirements on the city's behalf. The funds that are generated by these invoices sent to the excavators fund this contract. That was the whole purpose. The city is allowed by law to invoice. Potential savings or loss of revenue is the concern. At the lowest rate, if it took 6 months, the city would lose the option of obtaining that $950,000 in revenue, but still required to pay their contractor for the services they perform to protect the facilities and infrastructure of the city. Again, we're not saying that it is going to happen. We're saying that that's something that must be considered in dealing with all the facts.
I would like to offer that in the event that at the end of the 1 month transition phase, the information isn't properly being imported at DPW, then we would request an extension of the incumbent's contract to allow for that, if that were the case.
Okay, final argument.
I don't have it, Your Honor. Only thing I would add, if I may, it's just in terms of a visual that helped me understand what is provided. I don't have enough copies for the entire board, but it's a 4-page printout of what is ticketed out from a misutility incident. And so each one of these locates services requires this report that gets provided to my client or whichever contract holder. Ultimately, at the end of each month, they provide a couple 100-page report. They've turned this 4-page thing into 2 lines of code that fits into there. And so those 2 lines are kind of a text format document that gets sent to the building and allows them to do what they need to. Understanding that and seeing how hard it was to simply pull this up and to have all this information organized this way is part of what we think should have been addressed in a solicitation, what we raised during the bid process. And we thank the board's time and consideration for reviewing our matter.
Thank you. I entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I will move that the board reject the protest as unfounded, that the board deny the request for postponement, that the board deny the request for rebidding, and that the recommendation of procurement be adopted and the award made to Procom Engineering, subject to the prerogative of procurement to come back to the board within 30 days after the commencement of the contract as indicated.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. There be no
Yeah.
more business before this board. We will recess until bid opening at 12 noon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. The Board of Ethics is now in session for the receiving and opening of bids. I have 3 addenda to read today. The first one is GS 16810, Mitchell Courthouse roof replacement. Please change the bid due date from June 27th to July 11th, 2018.
The changes noted. Do you want to do all of them?
How we prefer. I got 2 more to do. If you-
Oh, okay, I'll wait.
Thank you. All right. The second one is for SC 921, improvements to the Gwynns Falls Sewer Shed Collection System, Area B. Please change the bid due date from June 27th to July 11th, 2018. Okay. And the final one is for ER 4130, Environmental Restoration Project number 14. Please change the bid due date from June 27th to August 8th, 2018. Those are the addenda for today.
Okay, all of the changes are noted.
All right, thank you. And which one is this, my dear? Which is number?
Single bidder?
It's supposed to be several. But I'm going to start with this one because the other ones look like they are. Okay, here's the original. Here's the duplicate. B50005155, General Charter Bus Transportation Services. A bid bond is not required. Okay.
It's on page 10.
Okay, great.
Section 1.
Okay, thank you. Page 10 is different. Okay, let me look a little further. Oh, that's the, you know what, do I have the same rule? Okay, all right.
It's under the bid document. first.
Okay, big back, okay, thank you.
Page 10.
All right, let me go a little slower. See, that's what- maybe back a little, it must be, they may have 2 sections or something. Let me see what they did.
Oh, that's the backside.
Okay.
Near the back.
Okay, near the back.
Different back. Same back.
Towards the end. Okay, thank you. Great. Thank you. Okay. Dillon's Bus Service, Inc. Next page. Thank you. Thank you. $17,482.75. All of Dillon's. Yes.
Yeah.
We should,
Wow,
we have
yeah.
thicker rubber bands
Need a
down
thicker one.
It's about maybe a fourth of the way through the pack. I found it just about this deep in. Right after that affidavit page. Yes. Academy Express LLC, $333,000.
Can I just get clarity?
Yes.
$333,000. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is a different bid, okay. This is waiting on, okay. Woodlawn Motor Coach, Inc., $252,708.
The first one, this one. Yeah, but it says total basis. Sum of item one.
They only did
They
the
only
first.
did one,
Mhm.
so.
Look, it had that bit.
Yeah, this one.
Sure, okay. This is 627.
I'll send this one over to you.
Okay.
Three parts.
I make a motion to refer the bid of Civil's Transportation to the Law Department for review.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of referring the civil's transportation bid to the law department for review, say aye.
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 All right, it's unanimous that bid will be referred to the law department.
If she wants to put them together too. Airport Metro Connection, Inc., doing business as Excellent Tours. $22,987.50.
The Woodlawn Motor Coach, Academy Express, Airport Metro Connection, Inc., and Dillon's Bus Service bids will be referred to the Bureau of Purchases for review. This chair.
Oh, this one.
You might need it. Yeah, thank you. B50005445, skid steer loaders. A bid bond of 5% of the bid is required.
You have the bid? Okay, yeah, the bid bond. Yeah.
Jesco Inc. with a bid bond. Item 3. Okay. This is an item bid with 3 different items, so the prices will not be read. And again, it's Jesco Inc. with a bid bond. That goes with this one. Looks like they got the name on it, which is good. At the top. And check and see. Okay. Metro Bobcat Inc. with a check. Okay, good. Finch Services, Inc., with a check. What's the rest of theirs? Valley Supply and Equipment Company, Inc., with a check.
Okay, all four of these bids will be referred to, the Bureau of Purchases for review.
Thank you. There being no further business, we are adjourned. Thank you.